So before I get started with my research, I just want to share with you a little bit about my positionality within this research. And pretty much as an undocumented Latina, I hold an insider's perspective to the daily struggles and experiences that undocumented students face. Throughout my life, I have experienced a range of emotions, such as denial, fear, anxiety, and even empowerment. My emotions and some of the problems that were caused by my immigration status have also affected my daily life and my social emotional well-being. There has been times when my emotions have taken control over my body and mind, which have led me to distance myself from the people that I love and care. Ultimately, I know that I need to reach out for help and see some counselors so that they could give me some tools to better navigate and overcome some of the discrimination that I encountered as an undocumented student. My own personal help-seeking attitudes led me to wonder what other undocumented students were saying or what they were thinking. And this is pretty much what led my current study, which are 3 case studies of undocumented college students and their help-seeking attitudes. So Joaquin Luna, que descanse en paz, rest in peace, was an undocumented student with a dream of becoming an architect. In November 2011, the night right after Thanksgiving, he shot himself in the restroom, leaving behind a note that explained why he ended his life. In the note, he spoke of his desperation, of what he felt to be the wall blocking out his future and preventing him from attaining his dreams. He wrote with despair about the DreamX failure to become a law. Joaquin is a vivid example of the struggles that undocumented immigrants face due to the systemic forms of oppression that lead individuals to wonder whether their lives are even worth living. I can't help it but to wonder if his situation would have been different if only he would have reached out for help. Joaquin was an undocumented student. His experiences were very different from that of the documented population. So you're probably wondering, what does it mean to be undocumented? How are they different? For the purpose of my research, the undocumented immigrants are those who migrate and reside in the United States without any form of legal permission or protection. Some of the key differences associated with being undocumented is the lack of services, such as legal protection, meaning that a person can be deported at any time. In addition, the lack of Social Security, employment opportunities, and access to information or healthcare. Within the undocumented population, there's also intergroups or subgroups, such as the undocumented college population. Since 2001, after the passage of the California Assembly Bill 540, undocumented college students collectively identified as AB 540. California Assembly Bill allows students who meet the criteria to pay in-state tuition instead of out-of-state tuition, as long as they meet the criteria. Some of the criteria to qualify as AB 540 are attend three or more years at a California high school, graduate from a California high school, or obtain a GED, and file an affidavit with the attending university or college that they will be attending. According to Leslie Abrego, AB 540 was the first collective identity that undocumented youth ascribed themselves in California. She suggested that being referred to or self-identified as AB 540 allow for students to feel unstigmatized or for students not to have a sense of criminality or illegality. The number of AB 540 students at the University of Santa Cruz is very low. According to the UCSC Institutional Research Office, there's only 22% Latinos who are undergraduates and graduates here in Santa Cruz. Out of those 22%, only about 75 to 90 are undocumented, and not all of them are Latinos. The approximation 75 to 90 is not recorded anywhere, it's not documented, because it's not safe to keep a list of undocumented students. However, I've heard of this number and learned about this number through different internal meetings. Sorry. This shows the importance of examining and researching the undocumented community here in Santa Cruz, because the numbers are so low. Their experience and their social emotional needs are very different from that of the documented population. Previous research has only conducted work within undocumented students at community college, and that's because the community college have a larger population of undocumented students. As you all know, it's very expensive to be here. For example, William Perez and Cortez conducted a qualitative and quantitative study in which they focused on undocumented Latino community college students and their social, emotional, and academic experiences. They found that the community college students experience a wide range of emotions and challenges on a regular basis due to their status. Participants felt discriminated against because of their status and the lack of a California ID. Something so simple, right? Just an ID. Many felt embarrassed to show their Mexican ID, also known as a consular, because oftentimes that ID is rejected because it is not a valid form of identification that is issued by the California government. In addition, students experience anxiety because they worked for 40 hours, and yet they still didn't have enough money to pay for their tuition. Some of the students in his study had to take semesters off because they simply couldn't afford to continue. But besides looking at the undocumented literature, I also examined at the research that reflects ethnic minorities' attitudes towards counseling. And specifically, I looked at the Latinos' ratings of the counselor's ethnic preference. In column Wampold and Casely, a meta-analysis, they discussed a particular approach in which suggests that clients would always prefer to have a counselor of their own ethnic background. However, Burham and Hellops suggested that the ethnic minority person's stage or state of ethnic identity, developments such as acculturation or cultural commitment, had a major influence on the preference or perceptions for the counselor. Then Lopez and Fong suggested that the mixed findings in the ethnic minority's preference had to do with the research methodology. They identified two methods in which perception and preference paradigms were researched, asking the participant two very different questions. In the perception paradigm, the participants are judging the counselor based on credibility or competency, whereas the preference is asking the participants to choose one or the other. However, in the meta-analysis, they still concluded that ethnic minorities tend to prefer ethnic minority counselors more favorably than European American counselors. Within the work of William Perez and Cortez and this meta-analysis, I developed my own research question. So there are two of them. What are some of the attitudes among undocumented college students about using counseling services? And what, if any, are the participants' preferred counselor's ethnicity when dealing with problems associated to their undocumented immigrant status? The participants in my study were a convenient sample, meaning that I knew them. There were 3 participants, 2 females and 1 male. They were self-identified as first-generation undocumented UCSC undergraduate students between the ages of 18 and 21. One of the participants was a first year here in Santa Cruz, and the other 2 are a second year. The participants were between the ages of 11 months to 9 years old when they first migrated to the United States from Mexico. The participants ethnically and racially identified as Mexican and Hispanic. So I did a qualitative study in which I did a demographic survey. And in order to protect my participants' identity, I didn't collect any personal information such as their phone number, student ID number, or things that weren't really relevant. I just asked them simple questions as to where were they born, what year did they migrate to the United States, was their family's income how many siblings do they have, just things about them. In addition to the demographic informational survey, I conducted an interview, which was a replicate of Lopez and Fonk's 1991 study. In the interviews were on average 22 minutes long. During the interviews, participants were asked to think of a personal problem that they have had in the last year. This problem could be related to them, their family, their friends, their partners, schools, or anything, as long as it was related to their immigration status. They were asked to choose a problem that was primarily people of their same ethnic background are likely to encounter. They were given as much time as they needed, and then they were asked to share it with me. After the interviews were conducted, I transcribed the interviews, and together with the research team, we did inductive coding. We found 3 common themes on the attitudes among undocumented college students and the utilization of counseling services. Those themes were the fear of being perceived as weak, the fear of the unknown, and trust. In addition, participants in my study all tended to prefer a Mexican-American counselor. My first finding was the fear of being perceived as weak. And I'm going to demonstrate it through the words of one of my participants, Mariana. Mariana and her parents migrated to the United States in 1996. She was 3 years old. She entered the country without any legal permission, so she classified and still classifies as an undocumented immigrant. Mariana grew up in Los Angeles and is part of a working-class family. She is currently completing her first year here at Santa Cruz. And when I asked her to share one of her problems, she shared with me the problem of financial support, which is very common within the undocumented community, just as Perez and Cortez findings demonstrate. Mariana expressed feeling very sad, depressed, and she even felt like a failure because she wasn't able to find the money to continue her education. She felt very sad and said that it hit her very hard as she didn't even want to go home. She spent 4 days on campus trying to avoid her friends and her housemates because most likely they were going to know there was something wrong with her. I asked her, did you think about going to the counseling and psychological services so that they could help you with some of the feelings that you were going through? Yes, maybe they cannot provide you financial support, but they could give you other tools that you need. And her answer was, I guess, as well, I was a little bit stubborn, how I didn't want to receive help. The sense of not showing, how do I say it? And I asked her, vulnerability? And she said, yeah, vulnerability.